guys, welcome back to another crash course. In this crash course, you will learn what Redux Thunk is and how to implement it to fetch the data from the database via an API. I will also show you a diagram of the Redux Thunk's data flow, and at the end of this crash course, I will compare the differences between Redux Thunk and Redux Saga and when should we use it. So let's dive into it.
Alright guys, so now let's just take a look at this diagram here. So this is the flow of the Redux Thunk. So here you can see that we have the dispatch. So what this does, it dispatch an action and then it goes to the Thunk, which is the middleware. And next it will just try to fetch the data from the database. And once the fetching is done, then it returns a list of data. And then it just store all of the information or the data into the reducer. So this is a simple illustrations of the Redux Thunk's flow. And when you take a look at the Redux Saga, it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that how we implement all of the what you can see right here into the code. So now let's just take a look at what we have right here. So this is the code from the Redux Crash Course 2021. I will also leave a link in the video description as well, and I would recommend you to go watch this one first before coming to this crash course. And now let's just take a look at the code what we have previously. And here you can see that we have defined the action, which is the pad increment and pad decrement with the type here as well. And when you take a look at the pad counter, which is the reducer, we have the information as you can see here, which is the pad increase, pad decrease, and this is the depot value. And we also combine all of the two reducer here into one, as you can see. Then we return this with the export the reducer, and next we will be using it right here. So we just import it down here, and when I scroll down here you can see that we also create a store which including the reducer as well as the Redux Dev Tool extension here as well. So once we have that, we just wrap it around the component. So right now I only have one component, which is the app component. If you have more, you can also add it down here as well. So now let's take a look at the app.js file. So here we imported the action, which is we define it right here, and we also have import the user selector and use patch as well, which you can see right here. And down here, whenever the user click on the one of the action, then it will just dispatch that particular action, including the add pad and also remove pad, as you can see here. And this is just the pad counter, and this is the number of favorites so far, as you can see here when I click on this. So this is just the old code in the Redux crash course. So now let's start updating the information here. So instead of the text you can see here, I would say welcome to React Redux Thunk crash course, and I would want to remove the information down here as well. So this is not required at the moment. Let me just comment this one out for now. Yep, just keep it as is and try to save it again. So now let's just go back and take a look. So now this is what we have. And next, what I want to show you is to install this library here. So this is the Redux Thunk. As you can see, this is very popular. And now let's just copy this, click on it, go back, terminate this pressing on Ctrl+C and press Y, paste it in and try to install the library. Okay, so Redux Thunk has been installed and the application has also restart as well. So now let me just close this one and going back to the code. What I'm going to do now, just go to the actions folder in the index. I'm going to define new action, So I want to fetch a list of user, but before getting into what endpoint we are going to use, let's just quickly try to define the action. So first one will be get users request, like that, and we will return the type of get users request. And next one will be creating another one which call get users success. For this one, we want to return the type which is get users success. Next action will be we want to get the user failure. So just in case there's something happen or the endpoint doesn't exist, then we want to use this action. So this one will be get user failure. For this one, I want to return get users failure, like that. Okay, so now I want to create another action. So for this action, I want to also export as well. So we use the keyword export const. I'll call this action as fetch users. And instead of returning the action, as you can see on top here, for this one, because we are using the Redux Thunk, we are allowed to create the returning the function instead of the action. So this will be returning the function like this, and we can use the dispatch, also the getState as well, like that. But because in this tutorial we are not focusing on the getState, then we can get rid of this for now. Now let's quickly look at the endpoint here. So this is the endpoint that we'll be using. As you can see, this is a website from the JSON placeholder. When I scroll down, you can see there's a list of this endpoint. So the one that I'm going to use in this crash course, this is this one, the users. And when I click on this here, you can see we have this list of 10 users. So now let's quickly grab this endpoint here, copy that, and on top of this action, I'll just put this in the URL variable and paste that URL in here, just as you can see here. So now for this one, let's just quickly use the fetch function. So we just pass in this URL, which is right here. I use the method. So this will be the get method. We want to make the get request, and once we get that, then we want to have the response, which then turn this response into JSON. So JSON, and what's next, which is then we have the list of data. So this will be data, and it returning the data. I will store it into this user variable, like that. And right here we can start using the dispatch, but I want to create this catch first. So this will be in case there's an error, then we can just store all of the error message. Will be error message, and this is the error dot message. Okay, so now we have this, and what I'm going to do, so on top here, before we fixing the data, I want to call the action. So which action is it? It will be the get user request. So now we can dispatch this one right here. So this will be dispatch get user request. So right here, what I'm going to do is basically I want to set the loading to true whenever that we are fetching the data, or we try to make a request to the through the endpoint right here. Then we want to set that variable called loading to true. whenever that the fetching is done, then we want to set it back to false. So this is what it will be doing. And for this data, so when we successfully fetch the data, we have a list of data right here. Then I want to dispatch. So I want to fire off the action, which is called get user success. So right here, we want to pass in this list of user right here. So we basically want to dispatch this get user success action, which will then store the list of users in the state in the users. Okay, so that's what it does. If there's an error happen, then we also want to dispatch the get users failure, and we want to pass in the error message. All right, so now we have defined all of the necessary action. So first one is the get user request, and here get user success failure, and we also define the endpoint, and down here we have the fetch users actions. So instead of returning the action, we return the function instead, and we dispatch this whenever that it is making a request and it haven't done fetching the data yet. Then we want to set the loading to true, and this is the method that we'll be using, which is the get request. And once we have a list of user, then we want to dispatch the get user success with a list of users here. Otherwise, we want to dispatch the get user failure. All right, so now we done defining the actions. Next, go to the user. Inside the user folder, we want to create a new file. So this one I will call it as user.js, like that. Okay, let me also try to close this and then put this index user right there, like that. Okay, so now inside the users.js, I will create the user. So I'll call this as users, and this will be the state equal to initial state, that we also have to define it on top here as well. So this will be const initial state, and we will set the list of user, the empty array, and we also down here let's have the loading. So first by default it will be the false, and error we want to set this to null. Okay, so then for this one, this will be the action. Now we can use the switch. This will be action.type. Now we can define the case. So first one will be get user request, and we want, don't forget the colon as well, and we will return the state with the loading. Now we want to set this to true. So next case will be get users success, colon, and we return all of the previous states with the loading. Now we want to set this to false, and returning the list of users. So this will be action.payload. Next case will be get users failure, and we return the state with the loading. We also set this to false, and we want to see the error message. So this will be action.payload, and next will be the default one. So we want to return the state, and let me also export it down here as well. This will be export default user. So we're exporting this user reducer. Alright, so now let me just quickly try to explain you this one again. So on top here we have defined the initial state, which the user, we have set the empty array. and the loading by default it's set to false, and error we set it to null. Down here, this is when it comes to use the initial state, and also the action here, the action.type. So all of the action dot type here is coming from this action that we have defined. So for the first one, the get user request, we want to return the state, and also with the loading we set this to true. So whenever that we make a request to the backend through an endpoint, then it will just set this loading to true. So once the fetching done, if it's successful, then we want to set the loading back to false, and we have the or return the list of user, which is coming from the action.payload. And let's just take a look here. Actually right here, we want to also have the payload as well. So the get user request, this will be the payload with the list of user, so through this parameter. And for the failure, again, this will be payload will be the error, and put it right here as well. So this is for the action. Okay, and for the case number 3, which is get user failure, we will also set this loading to false, and whatever that the error we get, then we want to show that error to the user as well. And the default, this will return the initial state. So here in the index.js, in the reducers, we want to combine all of the user together. So currently we have 2, pet counter and pet favorite. Now we add another one, which is the users. And don't forget to import it on top here as well. So this will be user coming from the users, like that. So now we also done defining the reducer. Next will be the index.js. So now let's just on top here, let's import the applyMiddleware. So the create store coming from the Redux. Then we want to also use the applyMiddleware with the compose. All right. So we also want to import the Thunk right here. So this will be Thunk from this the Redux Thunk, not Think. So now let's just scroll down. I might want to get rid of this as well. So it would look like this. Yep. And inside the create store, which now we have the Redux dev tool. So we might want to move this. Now let's just quickly use the compose, and we have this bracket here, and we inside the compose we will be using the applyMiddleware, and this will be the Thunk. So now let's just try to move this Redux dev tool and place it inside this compose function. For the create store, we will need to wrap this with the parentheses as well. So now let's just quickly save this, and this is what it looked like. So basically we have the compose, which then wrap the applyMiddleware with the Thunk that we imported from the Redux Thunk, and we move this Redux dev tool into this compose function as well, and we wrap the parentheses around this create store, and the reducer just stay here. So this will just stay the same right there. And yep, that's also finished this index.js as well. So next we will be trying to show the list of user onto the screen. And before we getting into writing the code inside this app component, which basically we use the use effects whenever that the page load, we will then fix the data automatically below the app component. we will need to define two functions. So first one will be the map state to prop, and next will be the map dispatch to prop. So now let's just quickly do that here. First one will be map state to prop. I will explain you what this function does. So now let's just we want to have the state, so we will return the I just call this as user data, and this will be state.users. And for this one here, so this will be map dispatch to props, like that, and we use the dispatch. And for this one, we want to return the basically dispatch the fetch user action creator. So I'll call this one as fetch user, the same one as well. So this is the dispatch and fetch users. So this is the fetch user that we define in the action. So it's this one here. Okay, and we also want to import the connect from the React Redux. So now down here we can start using the connect. So I can now connect the map state to prop with the map dispatch to prop, and we connect these two with the app component here. So now we are ready to use the data, and on top here, which is the app, we will need to deconstruct the prop. So this will be user data and also fetch user. Where are these two coming from? Well, it's coming from down here. So we return this user data and also the fetch user, which is right here. So to know if this is actually working or not, let me quickly consult log the user data right there. So let me quickly save it and quickly go back here. Let me inspect this. Okay, let's try that again. Yep, it seemed to be working fine. We have the initial state, which is the empty user array, and the loading set to false and error set to null. But right here, we actually see nothing because we haven't used the use effects yet. So right here, let me also import. Now let me try to import the use effect from React. And right here, we can start using the use effects. So this is the use effects. It automatically generates this for me. Let me get rid of this. And I want to use the fetch users. And this will be the empty array because we only want to call this fetch user once. So now let me just quickly save that again. And now let's take a look here. Let me refresh this, and here you can see we still have the user, which is 0. Let's just take a look at the code. So this is the reducer, and yep, it should be coming from here because we are using the small letter. Let's change this back to the capital letter and take a look again. Let me refresh this. Okay, yep, that's seems to be working fine. As you can see, we have a list of users, and this right here it's set back to false. Okay, so yep, that's working. So what I'm going to do next, I can just get rid of this, and instead of using the use user data dot loading or user data dot error or user data dot users, I can just define it right here, just like this. So it will be user data dot users. This will be loading users data dot loading. Const error will be users dot error, and down here we can just start using it. So here I can start displaying this. So if the loading is true and I want to show the text loading inside this h2 tag, so this will be loading dot 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 like that. Let me quickly save this and take a look here. So yep, if it done switching, then it's gone. Okay, yep, that's working. Next one will be displaying if there's an error, if it is true, and also the loading is false. Then I want to show the error message. So this will be the error. So for this one, I want to show the user. So if the user is not empty, then I want to map through the users. So first here, this will be the users, and I want to display the user name in the h1 tag. So this will be h1, and I can map each user will be user.name. Let me just save this and take a look again. So here, when I refresh this, we see the loading text and then the list of users. And if you can take a look here, it say each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Well, then what we can do right here, we can just use the index like that, and in the h1 we can just use the key. Let's just use the index here, the key property. Let's take a look again, refresh this. Yep guys, it seems to be working now. And now let's start looking at the dev tool, which is the Redux here. So let me try to refresh this. Take a look here. So first one, we have the get user request, and you can see by default we set this to false. So whenever it fetch the data, it will set this to true. So once the data we done fetching the data, then we set this back to false, and now we have a list of users, which you can see right here. So we can also go to the action and see a list of users here as well, and this is the request. And now let me just go back to the endpoint and try to change the endpoint. So let's say I put something else. So this endpoint doesn't exist at all. Take a look here. When I refresh this, and here you can see we display the error message, which it say here failed to fetch. And we can also see that first it goes to this action, which is the get user request. The same thing, just set this to true. So once that's done, it will set this back to false, and the error message we can see here is failed to fetch. So yep guys, this is basically how we implement the Redux Thunk in the React. Let me go back here, try to go back, change it to the previous one. Yep, like that, the list of user. Okay, so I think I can quickly try to recap everything that we have covered in this crash course. So right here, the first one is the action index.js. Here we define this action. So the first one is the get user request. We have get user success and also get user failure. And for all of these action, it just return the action with the type here. But for this one here, the fetch user, so instead of returning the action, we return the function instead, because we are using the Redux Thunk. It allows us to do that. And here, right here, it's first one. We want to dispatch the get user request. So for this one here, we want to set the loading to true, and then we want to fetch that through the endpoint, which we define right here. So it will make a request to the database, to the backend, and it will return the list of data as you can see here. Then we want to dispatch this action called get user success. So we will set a list of users in here. So we pass in a list of user in this action. As you can see here, we have the payloads, and for the error, we have the error payload down here. If there, in case there's an error happen, we want to dispatch this get user failure with the error message here. So all of the action here will be then handled by the user. So in the user.js, this is the user. You can see that for the first one, the get user request, we set the loading to true, and this get user success, we set it to false with the list of user will, because right here it will store a list of users, and the same for this one, it will store the error message, and this is just the default value. And also don't forget to combine all the user together. Right here, this is the new one, which is the user, and import it up here as well. And in the index.js, we have used the applyMiddleware with the compose, and also importing the Thunk. For the store right here, we just use this compose that wrap around the applyMiddleware with the Thunk here, and the moving the Redux dev tool into this compose as well, and wrap the parentheses around the create store, and the reducer just stay here, the same one. And next one, we want to display all of the information to the user or onto the screen. So first, we will need to define this function. It will be first one here, the map state to prompt that return the user data. And this one here, the map dispatch to prompt, we will use basically dispatching the fake user. So for this fake user, we are imported from the action right here. So once we have that, so we want to get it into this get users. And once we have that, we can start using this. So what you can see here, this is called deconstruct the props. So now we have the user data. So instead of using this, I want to put it into variable. Then we can start using this easily without having to use the user data.error, and then right here user data.error again. So I just put it right here. And for the fetch user, we want to fetch the user whenever that the page load. We use the user fetch, and we also import it up here as well. And now we can use the user fetch, which is again coming down here, which from here. Now we can use all of the information. As you can see, we show all of this to the screen right here. Alright guys, so one thing to note here is that the .state here, this is actually not required for these two. So whenever I have this put here, when let's just say that, let's take a look here, we have a list of user, right? So when I change it to something else, and then let's just go back here, you can see that the message show here, but the thing is that the list of users still stay here. Let's just quickly refresh this, and you can see now we have this until we have to refresh that. But let's just say I put it back to normal. Take a look here again. It will still show here because again in the user.js in the reducer, we set this. So basically it just copy the old value, just copy the old data there plus the new one. So when I get rid of this, and let's just take a look here, when I try to refresh this, and now we only have that. And what about if I try to put this to something else that doesn't exist? And here you can see this is actually what we want to have. So when I put it back, Go back here, it automatically refreshes. As you can see, this is the result that we want. So just to make sure that removing the spread state here, this is not required in the get user success and the get user failure. Next, I want to also talk about the differences between Redux Saga and the Redux Thunk. So when we decide to use it, and the question is, what are the differences between Redux Thunk and Redux Saga? So for the Thunk, it required to write less boilerplate code, and it also easier to understand comparing to the Redux Saga. And the thing is that it's difficult to scale up. For the Redux Saga, there are more code to write, especially the boilerplate, and it's a little bit hard to understand because there are different concepts to learn, like the generator function and also the Redux Saga effects. And the thing is that it is easier to scale up. So when should we use the Redux Thunk and also the Redux Saga? For the small or medium scale project, it is recommended to use the Thunk because it's a lot easier and faster as well. And for the bigger project, then it is recommended to use the Redux Saga because it's easier to scale up when it comes to big projects. So yep, that's the differences between the Redux Saga and also the Redux Thunk and when should we use it. And I think that's pretty much it for this crash course, guys. I hope you learn a lot and find it useful. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Until then, see you guys in the next video.